My child was suffering greatly and required my kidney. My son's wife said to me, "It is your obligation. You are his parent." The physician was preparing to perform surgery on me when all at once my 9-year-old grandchild dashed into the area and shouted, "Grandmother, I will reveal the facts about why my father truly requires your kidney." The whole healthcare staff stopped moving. I am happy you are present. If you are viewing this clip, press the like icon. Join the channel and share in the remarks from where you are hearing my tale of retribution. I wish to learn how widely it has spread. I am resting on the chilled metal of the surgery platform. Bright glow from the operating light is dazzling my vision. It is so intense, I wish to close them forcefully, but I cannot. My entire frame is rigid, and it is not due to the chill. It is from an overwhelming sensation as though destiny is gripping my throat. The regular beep-beep from the cardiac monitor creates a steady pattern, but every pulse feels like a mallet hitting my skull. I can detect each noise in the space with sharp precision. The clinking of metal tools as the attendant organizes them, the crinkling of documents as Dr. Evans examines my records, and even the soft murmurs from beyond the window where my son's spouse Rebecca is with her mother and father. I attempt to raise my sight toward the frosted pane. There is Rebecca, her limbs folded across her torso, with a stare as cutting as a blade. She is murmuring something to her folks, but her focus stays on me. It seems she is issuing a command. Sign it immediately. Proceed. Do not delay. I have already placed my name on the approval document to give my kidney to my child, Adam. That sheet must be on the physician's surface now, my unsteady handwriting and permanent pledge. The attendant grasps the needle, and the sedative shines beneath the illumination. I shut my eyelids. I attempt a deep inhale, but my torso feels weighty like iron. I consider Adam, my eldest child, whom I nurtured and gave my entire existence to shield. He is in the adjacent space, frail, awaiting my kidney to endure. I assure myself this is the correct action. As a parent, I must perform it. But why do I sense this void in my spirit? This unnamed worry. All of a sudden, a loud disturbance surprises me. The surgery room entrance flies open, and a blast of cool air enters, causing the tool holder on the platform to rattle and clang. The whole area appears to pause its breathing. I open my eyelids, striving to raise my head, even though the restraints keep me secure. My 9-year-old grandchild, Mario, hurries in like a tiny storm. His shoes are coated in dirt, his school attire is creased, and his small torso is rising as he breathes heavily. Following him, a frightened attendant is pursuing, calling, "Young one, you cannot enter here." Heavens, halt! But Mario does not halt. He dashes directly to me, his large circular eyes full of terror, yet also resolve. "Grandmother," he states in a shaking tone, so distinct it grips my emotions. "I must inform all why my father actually requires your kidney." The entire space becomes quiet. The beep-beep from the cardiac monitor now rings stronger, as if it aims to break the area. Physician close by lets fall a set of operating clamps. The noise of steel striking the tiled surface is overwhelming. A sudden interruption in the strain. I gaze at Mario, my small grandchild, whom I still hold in my embrace and narrate tales to each evening. There he stands, holding an aged mobile device, his complexion light, but his eyes vivid. What information does he possess? Why is he stating this? My pulse is speeding as though it wishes to leap from my torso. I wish to yell to inquire right then, but my throat is so parched I cannot produce a sound. Dr. Evans, the lead physician, scowls. He lifts a palm, indicating for the whole staff to pause. His tone is profound but keen. Whatever you must state, state it immediately. I observe his look move over me and settle on Mario, as if he also is trapped in this odd instance on the opposite side of the pane. Rebecca strikes the entrance, causing the window to vibrate. Do not heed him. She cries in a high, nearly frantic tone. He is merely a youngster, you will observe. But Rebecca's expression is no longer chilly. It is quivering with alarm, as though a hidden matter is nearing exposure. Mario does not glance at his parent. He solely gazes at me, clutching the mobile device in his tiny palm so firmly his joints pale. He inhales deeply as if collecting all the bravery in his existence. I wish to rise, to embrace him, to assure him not to fear, but I cannot shift. I can only observe, and in my small grandchild's eyes I perceive an ache, a fact he is attempting to reveal. In that moment, as the whole space pauses its breathing, recollections of earlier times rush my thoughts like a flood, of those periods when I believed my household was a secure group filled with affection and confidence. I recall my former residence in Chicago, where each area carried the odor of cleanser, a fragrance I had grown so accustomed to, I no longer detected it. I am 67 years old, but at times I seem much aged, as if the years took my energy long ago. My spouse Joe has been unable to leave bed for over a decade. He remains in his worn wheelchair, its rollers creaking each time I move him to the rear yard for fresh air. He rarely speaks. Only occasionally does he release a breath, his stare lost in emptiness. Once I grasped his palm and inquired, "Joe, are you weary of this existence?" He merely blinked without reply. I am unsure if he comprehended me, or if I was merely speaking to myself. That residence was my entire realm, the site where I brought up my 2 children, Adam and Brandon. I performed all to advance them. I rose at first light to visit the marketplace to offer goods. In the afternoons, I would rest and stitch attire for the locals, and at times I would remain awake until late to repair damaged garments and provide them promptly. My palms grew coarse and marked, my fingers constantly with soil from handling at the marketplace, but I never grumbled. I simply desired Adam and Brandon to enjoy a superior life, not to endure like I had. Adam, my eldest child, was my honor. He was sturdy, tall, he labored in building, and always returned home with a boisterous chuckle, but in latest years he began to weaken. At first it was merely fatigue. Then, gradually, I noticed him faded with hollow eyes, and once I experienced a dreadful fright when he informed me he was passing blood in urine. I embraced him and questioned, "Adam, what is the matter, child? Inform me." He merely shook his head and grinned faintly. "Do not fret, mother. It is likely just from the intense labor." Rebecca, my child's spouse, entered our lives like an unusual breeze. She was attractive, she communicated kindly, and initially, I genuinely thought she was a gift for Adam. She attended to him carefully. She carried remedies home, monitored his meals, and recalled him to ingest his tablets at the precise moment. All the residents commended me. "You are so fortunate, Mrs. Jones, to possess such an excellent child's spouse." And I trusted it, too. Each time I observed Rebecca provide a dish of broth to Adam, I would assure myself I was merely anxious excessively. But at times I would notice her cool, calculating stare, as though she concealed something. Once I observed her in the rear yard, murmuring on the telephone late at evening in a quiet but rushed tone, "Do not fret, all is proceeding as planned." I questioned her, "Rebecca, who are you contacting so late?" She was surprised and chuckled anxiously. "Just a companion, mother. Return to rest. Brandon, my junior child, was unlike. He is 26 years old. He resides a few streets from my residence and performs as a pipe fitter and wiring specialist. Brandon does not converse much, but each time he visited, he would always carry something edible. At times some fruits, other times some loaf that was still heated. He would rest beside me repairing the upper ventilator that creaked or replacing a bulb in the cooking area. Once he gazed at me and stated in his profound tone, "Mother, do not exhaust yourself like this. I do not wish to view you drained." I merely grinned and gestured with my palm. "I can still manage it, Brandon. You concern about your sibling. He requires you more." But Brandon merely shook his head, his stare full of worry. Mario, my small grandchild, was my sole delight in those burdensome days. He is 9 years old, and frequently arrived at my residence with his tiny satchel on his back. Mario enjoyed resting in the rear yard and engaging with some molded vehicles. I acquired him at a second-hand market. He would relate to me accounts, pure narratives that at times left me stunned. Once he gazed at me with his circular eyes and stated, "Grandmother, my parent speaks on the telephone at evening. I overheard her mention something about some remedy, but I did not comprehend." I grinned and tousled his hair. "I am certain she was merely inquiring the physician something for your father. Do not ponder so much about it, my lad." But within, a hint of discomfort was starting to grow, and then one afternoon all altered. I was in the cooking area readying supper. The aroma of browned rice was drifting in the air when Rebecca entered. She did not greet, she did not grin. She merely remained there with her limbs folded. Her tone was keen, like a blade cutting the atmosphere. "Mother, the physician states only your kidney matches. It is your duty. You must rescue him." I paused. The utensil in my palm fell into the pot with a muted thud. I gazed at her, attempting to locate a trace of kindness in her eyes, but I solely observed a chilly resolve, nearly a requirement. "Rebecca, I know I will perform all for Adam," I murmured, but my throat sensed dry. She nodded as though she had reached her aim and rotated. Not even 10 minutes elapsed when Rebecca's folks appeared. They entered my residence as if it were theirs. They rested at the eating surface and stated together, "That is correct. A parent's obligation is something you cannot escape. This entire household now relies on you." I remained there still with the utensil in my palm, sensing trapped. Adam, who at that instant was supported in a seat so thin I nearly did not identify him, grasped my palm. His palm was icy. "Mother," he murmured, "I believe you will rescue me." I gazed into his eyes, those eyes that, as a youngster, gleamed with so much vitality, and now only mirrored weariness and appeal. I nodded without ability to state anything, abruptly sensing like the tiny space had become stifling. The aroma of healing plants from Joe's container in the corner caused me to sense like I could not inhale. That evening, I carried Joe his dish of broth, just like each day. The creaking of his wheelchair on the solid floor was an ongoing recall that I was supporting this entire household on my back. I placed the dish before him. I gazed at him, but he merely breathed without stating anything. I wished to inform him to inquire if I was performing the correct action, but he was merely there as still as a silhouette. I went to the rear yard where Mario was engaging with his vehicle. He gazed up with his vivid eyes, but they were full of uncertainty. "Grandmother," he stated, "what if someone becomes ill because another individual is providing them remedy?" I halted completely. "My pulse missed a rhythm. Why do you inquire that, my lad?" I stated, attempting to remain composed. But Mario merely dropped his head and continued moving his vehicle without reply. What I did not realize was that at that instant I was on the border of a chasm, and only a few more movements would cause me to drop. The days that came after that afternoon, when Rebecca visited my residence and gave me no option, my existence sensed crushed by an unseen force heavier than the oppressive summer warmth of Chicago. I continued rising early, visiting the marketplace to offer my greens and fruits, resting under the faint illumination to stitch a tire. But my spirit was no longer calm. Every movement I made, every seam I created, brought with it an inquiry. Am I performing the correct action? Do I truly must give myself like this? But then Adam's appealing stare, Rebecca's keen statements, and her folks' questioning looks attached to me without providing me a single instant to inhale. The following morning, when the light was just appearing, Rebecca was already at my entrance. I had just completed readying tea. The fragrance of mint was just starting to occupy the residence when she entered without tapping, without greeting. "Mother," she stated in a tone as solid as a spike, "the physician states there is not much period left. If you continue delaying, he could be at risk." She placed a pile of health documents on the eating surface, pale sheets filled with figures and marks I did not fully comprehend. She indicated to each row as if instructing a youngster. It states plainly here that you are the soul matching one. No one else can rescue him. I remained there grasping the tea container. The heated liquid was scorching my digits, but I did not sense the ache. I solely detected the noise of the sweeper scraping the solid as I began to clean the residence, a method to avoid Rebecca's stare. I heard you, I stated in a scarcely audible tone. I will perform all for Adam, but within a heavy stone was pressing me down, causing me to wish to yell, to flee. I continued sweeping. The noise of the sweeper was like a mournful beat, attempting to overpower Rebecca's statements. But she did not cease. She merely remained there observing me, as if anticipating me to consent once more to verify I would not venture refuse. When she departed, I rested in a seat and placed my palms over my face. I considered Adam, of the days when he was small and would chase me at the marketplace, holding my garment and chuckling loudly. Mother, when I mature, I am going to construct you a lovely residence. Now he rested there, thin, pale, a remnant of what he once was. I pondered if I could allow him to depart without acting. But each time I considered giving my kidney, I was filled with dread. A dread not of the procedure, but of the sensation that I was being urged towards something larger, gloomier, that I could not view clearly. That evening Rebecca's folks arrived. They carried a container of produce, some tropical fruits and some citrus, but they merely placed it on the surface as a simple gesture and rested in the two primary seats in the resting area, as if they possessed the residence, her father, Mr. Collins cleared his throat a few times and stated in a hoarse tone, "In my time, folks would give all for their offspring. My ancestress sold all her property to rescue her child. Now it is your moment. You must perform the same." Rebecca's mother, Mrs. Peterson, nodded with a stare as keen as a blade. "If you decline, this household's respect will be ruined. What will the residents state?" "They will state you do not care for your child, that you do not merit to be a parent. I was resting there holding the border of the surface, sensing trapped in a shadowy spot. I wished to state something to inquire them why all the load was on me, but I could not open my lips. I merely dropped my head and nodded faintly like a machine. Supper that evening was as burdensome as a burial. Rebecca, with a false appeal, placed a portion of poultry on my dish, but her tone was chilly. "Mother, conserve your energy for the procedure." I gazed at the poultry on my dish, but I could not ingest. Adam was resting before me, his complexion thin and his eyes hollow. He attempted to grin faintly. "Mother, I know you will rescue me, just like all the occasions you rescued me when I was young." His statements were like a blow to my emotions. I recalled the days when he had elevated temperature, and I would remain awake all evening cooling him with damp fabrics, or the occasions he dropped from his cycle and I would hurry to wrap his injuries. I was always present. I was always the parent ready to perform anything. But this occasion, why did I sense so fearful? Brandon was resting in a spot of the surface, quiet as a silhouette. He did not consume. He merely mixed the utensil in his dish of broth, never removing his eyes from Rebecca. I observed his look filled with doubt, as if he was attempting to peer through my child's spouse's cover. I wished to inquire him, but I did not venture. The atmosphere in the space was dense. The sole noise was the clinking of utensils against dishes, like mallets on my awareness. After supper, Rebecca rose and personally carried Adam's dish to the cooking area to clean it, not permitting anyone else to contact it. She performed it rapidly, but I noticed her examining the dish very thoroughly, as if she feared someone would notice something within. That evening I could not rest. Resting in my aged bed, I detected the tick-tock of the timepiece on the wall. Every moment a recall that Adam's period was decreasing. I rose and walked down the corridor to obtain a cup of liquid. Then I detected murmurs from Adam's and Rebecca's space. I paused, remaining in the darkness, holding my inhale. Rebecca's tone was quiet but distinct. "Yes, after the transfer, we will possess all the information. Do not fret, she will not venture decline. I remained there, my pulse thumping, my palms were shaking so much I had to support on the wall so I would not collapse. Information, what were they discussing? I wished to tap on the entrance, face her, but right at that instant Rebecca opened it. She was surprised to view me and then grinned falsely. Still awake, mother? I was merely contacting to inquire about his remedy. I nodded and rotated away, but I sensed as if spikes had been driven into my emotions. Rebecca's grin, her tone, all was untrue, like a cover concealing something awful. In the days that came after the strained discussion with Rebecca and her folks, I sensed like I was existing in a hazy vision where all familiar was becoming odd and frightening. I proceeded with my daily chores, visiting the marketplace to offer, stitching attire, feeding my spouse Joe, but every act was automatic, without spirit. My emotions were burdensome, as if a dark cloud suspended over my head, and Rebecca's statements, Adam's appealing stare, they circled in my thoughts without providing me a moment of calm. But then one afternoon, when Mario, my 9-year-old grandchild, arrived, the initial split appeared in the barrier of confidence I was attempting to maintain upright. Mario entered with his shoes marked with soil and his tiny palms still adhesive from craft lesson color. He placed his aged satchel in a spot, rested on the ground, and removed the molded vehicle I had acquired him at the second-hand market previous year. I gazed at him, attempting to grin, but my thoughts were in disorder. Mario had always been a small brightness in my gloomy days, with his pure accounts and his clear chuckle. But that day he did not grin. He moved the vehicle to and fro on the ground with a distant look, and all of a sudden he raised his head and fixed on me. Grandmother, he stated in a quiet but distinct tone, what if my father is not ill because of existence, but because someone is providing him remedy deliberately? I was surprised, as if I had been struck. The utensil in my palm nearly fell, but I succeeded to grasp it, shaking. Why do you state that, Mario? I inquired, attempting to maintain my tone composed, but my pulse was thumping. I gazed into his eyes, so distinct but full of a concern that appeared too large for his years. Mario did not reply immediately. He dropped his head and continued engaging with his vehicle, but I observed him tighten his palm as if he were restraining something. I wished to embrace him to inquire more, but I solely succeeded at anxious chuckle. You are pondering too much, my lad. Your father is ill, and the physicians are healing him, but my grin was compelled, and Mario did not reciprocate it. He merely gazed at me. He rose quietly, grasped his satchel, and hurried back to his residence. Mario's inquiry was like a rock cast into a serene pond in my emotions, producing waves of uncertainty. I remained there in my tiny cooking area, gazing at the greens on the surface, but unable to focus. I considered Adam, of the containers of tablets Rebecca always carried, of how she managed all related to my child. I assured myself I was likely envisioning things. Rebecca was Adam's spouse. She cared for him. She would not injure him. But deep in my emotions, I knew something was incorrect. That afternoon, Brandon arrived with his tool container, stating he was going to repair the cooking light that had been blinking the evening prior. I observed him ascend the steps, rotate and secure items, and the illumination from the fresh bulb lit the whole cooking area. But then, as he descended with the aged bulb in his palm, Brandon gazed at me with an uncommon gravity. Mother, he stated in a quiet tone, nearly a murmur, my sibling's spouse is behaving very oddly. I observed some unmarked tablet containers in my sibling's remedy shelf, and she conceals them very effectively. I was surprised, and the dish I was cleaning in the basin fell, splashing liquid on my shirt. What are you stating? I inquired, my tone stifled. Brandon descended the steps and stood before me, his eyes full of worry. Mother, I fear what is wrong with my sibling is not a usual sickness. I fear someone. He did not complete the statement, but his look stated all. I remained there, my palms damp, sensing as if the ground was dropping beneath my feet. I wished to yell to inform Brandon he was overconsidering things, that Rebecca could not perform something so awful. But I could not communicate. I merely continued gazing at Brandon, and in my head Mario's inquiry echoed again. What if my father is ill because someone is providing him remedy? I attempted to dismiss that notion, but it attached to me like a silhouette. I could not evade. The following afternoon, I carried broth to Adam at the medical center. The pale space and the strong odor of cleanser caused me to sense like I could not inhale. Adam was resting down, thin with tubes in both limbs, but he still attempted to grin when he viewed me. "Mother, you are here already," he stated in a frail tone. I placed the container on the side table, and when I was about to provide him the initial spoonful, I observed Rebecca beside the bed grasping a cup of liquid. She quietly placed an odd-shaded tablet into the cup, a motion so quick that if I had not been observing thoroughly, I would not have detected. When I entered, she was surprised and spilled a bit of liquid on the ground. "What tablet is that, Rebecca?" I inquired, attempting to sound composed. She grinned, but her grin was compelled. "It is an addition for his kidney. The physician ordered it." I nodded, but a shiver moved down my spine. I could not remain composed. After Adam completed consuming, I searched for the duty physician, a mid-aged man with dense lenses. "Physician," I inquired in a shaking tone, "did you order any fresh kidney additions for Adam?" He was astonished and reviewed the records. "No, we have not ordered anything fresh. The present remedy is adequate." His reply left me paused. I remained in the medical center corridor detecting the notices over the speaker, but my thoughts were empty. Rebecca had deceived. What was that tablet? Why did she need to conceal it? At dusk, Mario arrived at my residence again. This time he did not engage with his vehicle. He rested in a seat and removed an aged mobile device with a damaged display from his satchel. "Grandmother," he stated in a quiet but solid tone, "I wish you to detect this." He entered something and passed me the device. A capture played. It was Rebecca's tone, murmuring, but distinct. "After the transfer, the examination outcomes will be ideal. Do not fret, she will not venture decline." I let fall the device. My palms were shaking uncontrollably. I gazed at Mario, my small grandchild, and observed that his eyes were reddened, as if he was just as fearful as I was. I located it on my parents' aged device. He stated in a stifled tone, "I do not know what it is, but I thought you should be aware." I embraced Mario, attempting to restrain the drops. "You are so courageous, my lad," I murmured. But within, all was collapsing. Examination outcomes. What was Rebecca discussing? I considered Adam, of the unmarked containers, of Brandon's doubtful look, of the odd-shaded tablet in the cup of liquid. They were separate parts of a riddle, but gradually they were assembling, creating an image I did not venture gaze at straight. That evening I did not rest. I rested in my quiet residence, detecting the tick-tock of the timepiece, every moment a recall that Adam's period was decreasing. One morning, I visited the medical center carrying an aged molded holder with heated meal. Aroma of rice and cooked flesh escaped from the borders. Adam's face was pale, chilly, and the odor of cleanser was so intense I had difficulty inhaling. I had grown accustomed to that setting, but that day I sensed it pressing on my torso. Adam was resting there with hollow eyes and a light complexion, but he still attempted to grin when he viewed me. "Mother, you are here so early," he stated in a tone as frail as a breath. I placed the meal on the side table and attempted to grin, but a tempest was raging within me. The uncertainties of the prior days, Mario's inquiry, Brandon's alert, all yelled in my head without providing me calm. Rebecca was already there, resting beside Adam's bed, fixing on the tube bag that dripped gradually. She did not gaze at me. She did not greet. She merely nodded quietly as if my attendance was expected. On the side table, I detected a tiny tablet container with the lid half concealed under a folded cloth tissue. The container had no mark. It was merely a pale molded holder with some odd azure tablets within. I grasped it, attempting to maintain my tone solid. What remedy is this, Rebecca? She was surprised. She nearly leaped and seized the container from my palm so quick that it caused me to move back. They are merely nutrients, mother, she stated with a grin as untrue as inexpensive color. The physician ordered them to assist his kidney. I nodded, but a shiver moved down my spine. Rebecca's grin, the manner she seized the container from me, all was incorrect, as if she were concealing a hidden matter I was not supposed to be aware. I rested beside Adam and began to feed him, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I considered the unmarked container, about what Brandon had stated about the odd remedies Rebecca was concealing. I considered Mario, about his pure but keen inquiry. What if my father is ill because someone is providing him remedy? I wished to inquire Rebecca right there. I wished to yell and require the fact. But I was fearful that if I opened my lips, all would collapse and I would lose Adam permanently. I gazed at my child as he fought to ingest each bite and assured myself, Mary, you must compose yourself. You must discover what is occurring first. At midday, Brandon arrived at the medical center. He entered with his palms still marked with oil from labor, and his aged shirt damaged at the shoulders. He did not state anything. He merely rested quietly in a spot observing Rebecca, who was in the corridor speaking to an attendant. When she departed, Brandon approached me and removed a tiny molded sack from his satchel. Mother, I wish you to view this, he murmured in a tone as strained as a string. He displayed me his device. On the display were some unclear images, but distinct enough to halt my pulse. It was Rebecca in the medical center lot, quietly removing a tiny sack from the rear of her vehicle and passing it to an unfamiliar male. The male was dressed in a dark coat and a hat that concealed most of his complexion, but I could plainly observe the sack of remedy in Rebecca's palm. I captured these images yesterday, Brandon stated in a shaking tone. I pursued her because I thought her conduct was very odd. Mother, I fear she is performing something to my sibling, Adam. I was without words, clutching the device so firmly my joints paled. The chilly ground of the medical center appeared to take all the heat from my frame. Brandon, I murmured. Are you certain? Did you detect what they were stating? Brandon shook his head, his eyes reddened. I could not detect well, but I observed her pass the sack to the male, and he passed her a cover. Mother, this is not usual. I gazed into Brandon's eyes. I observed the worry and the anger in them, and I knew he was not deceiving. But I still did not wish to trust it. Rebecca was Adam's spouse. She had pledged to attend to him. How could she perform something so awful? That afternoon, when I came back home, Mario arrived again. He did not hurry or engage as usual. Instead, he rested quietly in a seat, embracing his satchel. Grandmother, he stated in a quiet but resolved tone, I wish you to detect something. He removed the aged mobile device with the damaged display from his satchel and shaking, played a sound file. Rebecca's tone echoed, murmured, but distinct as a blade driving into my emotions. After the transfer, the information will be full. Do not fret, that aged lady will not venture decline. This outcome is worth 100 times more. I became stiff. I let fall the device on the surface, my palms shaking uncontrollably. I gazed at Mario, my small grandchild, and observed his eyes were reddened, his mouth pressed together as if he was restraining drops. I located it on my parent's aged device. He stated in a stifled tone, I do not know what it is, but I thought you should be aware. I embraced Mario, sensing as if the entire realm was falling at my feet. You are so courageous, Mario, I murmured, but my tone broke and drops moved down my cheeks. I considered Adam, of the unmarked containers of Brandon's images of Mario's capture. They were separate parts, but they were assembling, drawing a gloomy image I did not venture face. What was Rebecca performing? What information? What outcomes, and why did she state that aged lady will not venture decline? I sensed deceived, not just by Rebecca, but by my own belief in household, in affection. That evening I did not rest. I rested in my quiet residence, detecting the alerts of an emergency vehicle in the road, the crimson and azure lights flashing through the pane like slices in my spirit. I considered Adam, of how he was weakening each day, of the odd remedies of Rebecca's calculating murmurs. I considered Brandon, of the doubt and worry in his eyes, and of Mario, the 9-year-old who had courageously carried me. The fact I grasped my head, sensing like my mind was going to burst. I wished to hurry to the medical center, face Rebecca, yell, and require an account, but I was fearful that the fact was even more horrible than I envisioned, fearful I would not possess the power to endure it. I rose, went to the rear yard, and gazed at the faint lunar light. I considered Joe, my quiet spouse, who could only rest and observe all. I wished to inform him, to inquire him what I should perform, but I knew he would not reply me. I was alone with the parts of effect that were gradually exposing themselves. The following morning I awoke with the sensation that the entire realm was pressing on my torso. The avians singing in the rear yard, a noise that normally carried me peace, now sensed like blades piercing my thoughts. I knew today was the day the medical center would create the ultimate choice about Adam's kidney transfer. The hints Mario and Brandon had provided me, the capture, the images, the unmarked container, they kept circling in my head, but I did not venture face them. I was fearful that if I explored deeper, I would locate a fact I could not endure. I merely wished to rescue Adam, to view my child healthy again, even if the cost was a portion of my frame. But deep down, I knew things were not that straightforward. The medical center arranged me for midday. I entered a tiny conference space where Dr. Evans was already awaiting me. He distributed the lab outcomes on the surface, pale sheets filled with figures and diagrams I did not comprehend. Mrs. Jones, he stated in a serious but solid tone, we have examined all carefully. You are the most matching individual to provide your kidney to Adam. If we do not continue soon, his existence will be at risk. I rested there, clutching the border of my shirt, my head humming as if I had a group of insects within. I comprehend, I murmured, but my tone was so quiet I questioned if he had detected me. Doctor Evans gazed at me, and his face eased. Do you require more period to ponder it? He inquired. I shook my head, not because I had already chosen, but because I sensed I had no other path. Rebecca, her folks, and even Adam, they were all relying on me, and I could not allow my child perish. Through the pane of the entrance, I observed Rebecca remaining there with her limbs folded. Her stare, as keen as ever, gave a nod to her mother, Mrs. Peterson, as if she were certain I would not venture decline. That motion gave me a shiver, as if they were engaging in a match of strategy, and I was merely a piece. I wished to rise to yell that I knew about the container, about the capture, but I could not. I merely rested there, sensing trapped in an unseen enclosure with no exit. That evening I collected the entire household in my tiny residence. The resting area was packed, the yellowish illumination of an aged bulb reflected on the damaged walls. I placed a tea container on the surface. The fragrance of mint could not scatter the burdensome atmosphere. Rebecca's folks, Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson, rested in the middle, taking the two finest seats as if they were the possessors. Rebecca rested beside them, her palms joined, providing me a sideways glance as if to ensure I would not retreat. Adam was resting on a couch, his complexion pale and his inhaling frail. Brandon was supporting against the wall, quiet, but his eyes were reddened, as if he was restraining a fury about to burst. Mario was curled in a spot, embracing his tiny satchel, his eyes full of trouble. I inhaled deeply. My palms shook as I placed the tea container down. I have reached a choice, I stated in a shaking tone, but attempting to sound solid. I am going to provide my kidney to Adam. Space burst like an explosion. Mrs. Peterson applauded and stated in a high tone, "That is a true parent. I knew you would not fail this household." Rebecca placed her palms over her face. Drops were flowing. but I observed how she tightened her palms as if she were performing in a drama. "Oh, mother," she stated in a stifled tone, "I knew you care for him more than anyone." "Thank you." Adam gazed at me with eyes clouded by weariness, but he still succeeded to state, "Mother, I owe you my existence." His statements broke my emotions like a blade to the torso, but then Brandon leaped up and struck the surface hard. The thud caused the teacups to shake. "No," he cried, his tone shaking with anger. "Mother, do you not observe? You are giving yourself for a malicious scheme. She is utilizing you, and she is utilizing my sibling, Adam." The atmosphere in the space became dense. The sole noise was the humming of an insect around the bulb. Rebecca jumped to her feet and indicated at Brandon. "What are you stating? How venture you blame me? I perform all for my spouse." But Brandon did not retreat. He approached, his stare on fire. "Blame you? And what about those unmarked containers and those late evening contacts?" "Mother, you cannot allow them trick you." I gazed at Brandon, then at Rebecca, and finally at Adam. I wished to state something to request Brandon to compose, but I could not. I merely gazed away, sensing as if the entire realm was descending on me. That evening I rested alone in my tiny chamber before the aged timber surface. The fuel light flickered. Its faint illumination lit the shaking words I was inscribing in my testament. I inscribed that the small residence would go to Brandon and some of my few possessions to Mario. Every mark was like a slice in my spirit. I did not know if I would endure the operation, but I wished to be ready to leave something for those I cared for. Joe was resting still in his wheelchair in a spot, observing me with his empty eyes. I observed his palms shake, as if he wished to state something, but could not. I gazed at him and drops moved down my cheeks. "Joe, I must perform it correctly. I must rescue Adam." He did not reply. He merely blinked, and 2 drops fell down his thin cheeks. I bent the testament and placed it at the base of an aged timber container where I stored recollections of my union. Outside, the precipitation poured, blending with the noise of my own weeping. Early in the dawn, when the sky was still shadowy and the mist attached to the tiny roads leading to the medical center, I was resting on a stretcher in an emergency vehicle. I was clutching a tiny cloth sack with a replacement of a tire and a stitched cloth I had possessed since my union day. The emergency siren wailed, but I no longer attended. The road lights passed through the pane, blurred like my damaged aspirations. I shut my eyelids and attempted to inhale, but my torso sensed burdensome. Today was the day I would provide my kidney to Adam, my child. I had already chosen. I had inscribed my testament. I had readied myself mentally, but my emotions were still tangled, as if I were entering a bad dream I could not awaken from. When the emergency vehicle halted, an attendant moved the stretcher down an endless medical center corridor. The scraping of the rollers on the tiled ground was like a mallet striking my skull. Rebecca was moving right following me. Her movements were light but solid, like those of a watcher. "Do not fret, mother," she stated in a quiet but keen tone. "After the procedure, all will be well." I gazed at her from the side of my eye and observed a spark of victory in her eyes, as if she had already obtained her triumph. Her grin gave me a shiver, not from chill, but from the sensation that I was being guided into a scheme where I was merely a piece without choice. At the entry, Rebecca's folks, Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson, were already there. They were attired formally. Mr. Collins in an aged but well-pressed outfit, and Mrs. Peterson in a vivid crimson gown, as if they were arriving to a major occasion and not to a procedure. They grasped Rebecca by the limb and welcomed the physicians with an excessive amiability, as if they had known each other all their lives. I detected Mrs. Peterson chuckle loudly as she stated to a youthful physician, "Thank you for all your assistance, physician. We will not forget this kindness." I remained there clutching my cloth sack, sensing like an outsider in my own account. Adam had already been carried to a waiting area. They permitted me to view him before I entered the operating space. The tiny space was chilly, and his thin limbs were full of tubes. His complexion was pale, his eyes hollow, but when he viewed me, he attempted to grin faintly. "Mother, thank you," he murmured, his tone broken by weariness. I grasped his palm. It was icy, and I sensed like weeping. "Adam, I will perform all to make you improve," I informed him. But my tone shook as if I were attempting to persuade myself. I gazed into my child's eyes. I observed in complete confidence in them and pondered, am I performing the correct action, or am I endangering my existence for something I do not fully comprehend? All of a sudden, Brandon came hurrying in with his palms still marked with oil from labor. He was breathing heavily. His shirt was drenched with perspiration, as if he had hurried a long way. "Mother, do not perform it," he stated, nearly appealing as he seized me by the shoulders. "I plead you, do not provide the kidney." Something is not correct. I gazed at Brandon. I observed his reddened eyes filled with anger and worry. I wished to inform him that I had already chosen that I could not allow Adam perish, but statements would not emerge. I merely placed my palm on his, pressed it softly, and allowed the attendant carry me away. Brandon was left there helpless, calling following me, "Mother, detect me." But I did not rotate. I did not venture rotate because I was fearful that if I gazed into Brandon's eyes I would break. The medical center corridor was long and chilly. The odor of cleanser was so intense it caused me sickness. An impersonal tone sounded over the speakers. "Operating space number 3, ready for kidney transfer." They carried me to a preparation area where an attendant placed a head cover and a face cover on me. The chilly azure robe they placed on me was a recall that I was about to lose a portion of my frame. I gazed at myself in the reflector. I observed my thin complexion, my eyes encircled by shadows. I inquired myself, "Mary, what are you performing? Are you certain this is the correct action?" But then the picture of Adam in the medical center bed appeared in my thoughts, and I clenched my jaws and proceeded. As I moved down the corridor, I observed Rebecca and Mrs. Peterson remaining by a glass pane speaking to an unfamiliar male. He was dressed in a dark coat and a hat that concealed his complexion, identical to the male in the image Brandon had displayed me. I observed Rebecca pass him a cover, and he rapidly placed it in his coat pocket. My pulse began to thump hard. A chilly perspiration moved down the rear of my neck. What were they performing? What was in that cover? I wished to halt, to yell, and require a reply, but the attendant grasped my limb and guided me into the operating space. Inside the operating space, the pale illumination shone directly into my eyes. So intense I had to narrow them. Dr. Evans was there, his complexion serious but composed. "All is ready, Mrs. Jones," he stated in a serious tone. "Merely unwind." I nodded, but my frame was stiff. The attendant positioned sensors on my torso, and the cardiac monitor's beep-beep was ongoing, but each pulse was like an alert. Rebecca appeared on the opposite side of the pane. She pushed her complexion against the window and created a gesture to sign rapidly toward the documents another attendant was grasping. I grasped the writing tool, shaking. The liquid spread on the sheet. When I placed my name, I sensed as if I were placing my name on my own end decree. I gazed at my unclear mark. I considered the testament I had inscribed the evening prior of Brandon, of Mario, and I pondered, will this be the final time I am aware? Just as the physician was preparing to administer the sedative, my pulse was thumping wildly. A chilly perspiration was drenching my back. I shut my eyelids. I attempted to inhale, but images of Adam, Brandon, Mario, and Rebecca were circling in my head. I considered Mario's capture of the unmarked container of Brandon's image. I wished to halt it all, but I could not. I had come too far. I had placed my name. I had entered this space. I could only rest there, awaiting with a dread that was overwhelming my emotions. But then, just as the attendant was about to administer the sedative, a collision caused the whole space to shake. The entrance flew open. The screech of the joints tore the atmosphere. All the physicians and attendants were surprised. Some rotated abruptly with alarm in their eyes. Mario entered like a tiny storm. His shoes were still marked with soil. His school attire was creased, and his tiny torso was rising as he breathed. He was firmly grasping his aged mobile device with the damaged display as if it were the most precious item in the realm. An attendant hurried following him, calling desperately, "Young one, you cannot enter here. Heavens, halt!" But Mario did not halt. He hurried directly toward me, his large circular eyes filled with terror, but glowing with a resolve I had never observed in a youngster. "Grandmother," he stated in a shaking tone, but so distinct it paused everyone in the space, "I must inform all why my father actually requires your kidney." His statements were like an explosion that burst in my head. I held my inhale. My pulse appeared to halt. The operating space fell into a complete quiet, broken only by the beep-beep of the cardiac monitor, which now rang stronger, as if it wished to break the calm. A close physician let fall a set of operating clamps. The steel noise against the tiled ground was overwhelming, a keen cut in the strained atmosphere. Dr. Evans, the lead physician, lifted a palm, indicating for the entire staff to halt. He scowled, but his tone was composed and solid. "Allow the youngster to communicate. Whatever you must state, state it immediately." I gazed at Mario. I observed his tiny palm clutching the mobile device, his complexion pale, but his eyes vivid, as if he were supporting the burden of the realm on his shoulders. "Exit." Through the pane, Rebecca struck the entrance furiously, causing the window to echo. "Do not heed him," she cried in a high, nearly frantic tone. "He is merely a youngster, you will observe." But Rebecca's stare was no longer icy chilly. It was shaking with alarm, as if the hidden matter she had attempted so hard to conceal was about to emerge. Mario did not gaze at his parent. He approached me, and with shaking palms, he pressed start on the mobile device. A capture played. It was Rebecca's tone, murmured, but distinct as a blade driving into my emotions. "After the transfer, the examination outcomes will be ideal. Do not fret, that aged lady will not venture decline." The entire space appeared to burst in quiet. I sensed my blood become ice, the atmosphere get trapped in my throat. Dr. Evans rotated abruptly to gaze at me, his eyes broad with surprise. "Halt!" he commanded in a tone as keen as a cutting tool. "Halt all readies immediately." An attendant rapidly removed the needle. The others remained still, not venturing to shift. Rebecca, on the opposite side of the pane, released a cry and struck the entrance. "It is not fact. She created it all. This youngster is being controlled," but her tone broke as if even she did not trust her own statements. I gazed at Mario and observed him burst into drops, but he was still attaching to the mobile device as if it were the final part of proof to rescue me. "I possess a clip, too," he stated, his tone stifled. "It is when my parent and grandparents are speaking about offering remedies." He started a clip, and the picture appeared on the tiny display. Rebecca and Mrs. Peterson in the lot exchanging a cover with the unfamiliar male I had observed prior. Mrs. Peterson's tone was detected. "After this operation, we will possess enough information to offer the remedy overseas. This funds will alter all." I rested there, my sight blurred by drops, sensing a blend of fright and ease. Fright for the fact I had attempted so hard to evade, now revealed before all, and ease because I finally no longer had to deceive myself. Brandon burst in from the corridor, his complexion red with anger. "Enough," he cried, throwing himself against the glass entrance to face Rebecca. "You poisoned him. You thought we were all sightless." Before anyone could respond, Brandon lifted his palm and struck Rebecca. The sharp noise echoed down the corridor, causing Mrs. Peterson's cry, "How venture you strike my child?" But Brandon did not halt. He indicated at Rebecca, his tone shaking with anger. "What remedies have you been providing him?" What did you perform to my sibling Adam? Rebecca placed a palm to her face. Drops were flowing down her complexion, but in her eyes I observed no remorse. Only the alarm of someone who has been found. You are insane, she cried, rotating to Dr. Evans. Do not heed them. They are defaming me, but Dr. Evans did not reply. He became pale and addressed an attendant. This is no longer a procedure. It is a violation site. Contact the authorities immediately. An attendant hurried out while the others remained there gazing at each other in bewilderment. I rested there sensing the realm crumble. Drops were moving down my cheeks, but I did not clean them. I gazed at Mario, my small grandchild, who had courageously dashed into the operating space to rescue me. I gazed at Brandon, my junior child, who had attempted to shield me at all expenses. And I considered Adam my child, who rested in the space adjacent, not aware that the spouse he trusted had deceived him. I remained there, allowing the drops flow, allowing the fact seep into every part of my being. In that instant, I comprehended that all had altered. The fact had burst out like an entrance being forced down, and nothing could conceal it now. The operating space, which had been chilly and quiet prior, had become a disorderly combat area. The bewildered attendants gazed at each other, not aware what to perform. Dr. Evans scowled. His keen stare examined each individual, as if he were attempting to preserve control in the midst of the tempest. I rested there, my sight blurred by drops, but unable to remove my eyes from the view. The fact Mario had just exposed was like a blaze, consuming away all the confidence I had remaining. Rebecca, after Brandon's strike, clutched her face and cried in a high tone, "How venture you strike me? I perform all for my spouse." Drops were moving down her complexion, but I could plainly observe the alarm in her eyes. It was not the ache of a spouse unjustly blamed, but the dread of someone who has been found. She rotated to her folks, seizing Mrs. Peterson's garment, her tone stifled. I did not perform anything incorrect. I merely wished to rescue Adam. Father, mother, state something. But Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson merely remained there, their complexions pale, unable to state a word. Mrs. Peterson, usually so sly and commanding, was now merely tightening her palms, biting her mouth to restrain a shake. All of a sudden, Mrs. Peterson struck the ground with her staff. The sharp noise of the timber against the tile echoed, and she indicated directly at me. "You ventured to control your grandchild into creating falsehoods about me, you wicked aged lady." Her statements were like a blow to my emotions. I wished to cry, to inform her that I had not controlled anyone, that it was her child who had deceived my household. But I had a blockage in my throat and could not communicate. I merely remained there gazing at her, sensing trapped in a shadowy place where all my years of giving were being stepped on. Mr. Collins, Rebecca's father, murmured quietly to a physician he knew, who was close in a quiet but rushed tone, "Please proceed with the procedure. We will manage all. We merely require this to end." He slid a cover into the physician's palm, but Dr. Evans approached immediately with a tone as chilly as frost. "The rule decides here, not funds." He seized the cover, threw it on the ground, and commanded an attendant, "Secure the entrances. No one departs. I am going to notify the medical center administration immediately." The noise of his movements was solid, like a statement that all had escaped control. Brandon from the corridor burst into the operating space, disregarding an attendant's efforts to halt him. He seized me by the shoulders, his eyes reddened, and cried, "Mother, do not provide the kidney. It is all their scheme. She poisoned my sibling. Do you not observe, Adam?" Brandon's tone shook, full of anger and ache. I gazed into his eyes and observed the desperation of a child attempting to shield his parent. I wished to state something, to soothe him, but I could not. I merely remained there. Sensing the realm crumble beneath my feet, From the ready space adjacent, Adam's frail and bewildered tone was detected. What is occurring? Why are they disputing? He attempted to rise, inhaling with effort. The tubes in his limbs shook with emotion. I detected my child's tone, and my emotions broke into countless parts. Adam knew nothing. He did not know that the spouse he cared for, the one he trusted, had pulled the entire household into a gloomy plot. I wished to hurry to him, embrace him, and inform him all would be fine, but I could not shift. I only rested there with drops flowing, sensing torn between my care for Adam and the awful fact that had just emerged. Mario, remaining beside me, broke into a bout of weeping, but he still raised the mobile device and stated in a stifled tone, "I possess another clip. This is when my parent provides the remedies to my grandparents." He started the clip, and the picture appeared on the tiny display. Rebecca and Mrs. Peterson in the lot, creating the swap with the unfamiliar male. Mrs. Peterson's tone was detected distinct and chilly. "If the transfer is a success, we can offer the remedy overseas. With that funds, we can clean all the unclean gains." The entire space fell quiet. An attendant placed her palm over her mouth, her eyes broad with fright. Dr. Evans was paused, clutching the records as if to contain his anger. Rebecca, in alarm, rushed to seize the mobile device from Mario, attempting to cast it to the ground. "No, that is untrue," she cried, her tone broken, but Brandon was quicker. He seized the device from her and pushed Rebecca, who fell to the ground. One of her elevated shoes flew off, rebounding on the ground with a sharp noise like the ultimate mark on the deception she had arranged. "Close your lips," Brandon cried, his complexion red with fury. "You think you can deceive everyone. What did you perform to my sibling Adam?" Rebecca was resting on the ground, her hair disordered, but her stare still had a spark of obstinacy. "I did not perform anything. You are defaming me." Medical center guards appeared. Two males in attire entered with serious faces. They approached Rebecca, Mr. Collins, and Mrs. Peterson, not providing them time to respond. Mrs. Peterson was still cursing with the staff shaking in her palm. "Deceiver, you ruined this household." She indicated at me, but her tone broke as if even she knew all was finished. Rebecca was grasped firmly. She twisted. "Allow me to depart. I did not perform anything incorrect," but her stare now only mirrored the desperation of someone trapped. I rested there still, my frame chilly, but my eyes broad open, observing the fact unfold before me. When the operating space entrance closed behind the authorities, the cries of Rebecca and her folks still echoed in the medical center corridor, but for me they diminished into the atmosphere like a bad dream that fades. Rebecca kept crying in a broken tone. I was adding to knowledge. Nobody comprehends me, but no one replied her. Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson, who once rested with such conceit in my resting area, now moved with their heads dropped, accompanied in quiet. I rested on the operating platform, still shaking, but it was no longer from dread. An odd sensation of ease flooded me, as if I had been released from an enclosure I did not know I was in. Dr. Evans approached. His complexion was serious, but his stare had eased. "Mrs. Jones," he stated in a serious tone, "we have terminated the procedure. We will move Adam to an alternate care, circulation combined with fresh remedies. You endangered your well-being readying for this, but you have rescued his existence and your respect." I gazed at him. Drops were moving down my cheeks, but I did not clean them. "Thank you, physician," I murmured in a frail but genuine tone. I did not know if I had truly rescued my respect, but I knew that for the initial time in months I sensed like I was inhaling, truly inhaling. Brandon hurried to me and assisted me rise. He grasped my palm firmly. His stare was solid, but full of ache. "You still possess me, Mother," he stated in a stifled tone. "I am going to shield you from now on, I vow." I pressed his palm, sensing the heat of his coarse, oil-marked skin. I gazed into Brandon's eyes and observed the power of a child ready to support the entire realm to shield his parent. "You are my honor, child," I murmured, and the drops fell again. Brandon did not state anything. He merely embraced me firmly. and in that embrace I located some solace in the midst of the wreckage of my household. Adam was moved to a healing space. When I entered, he was resting down, his complexion pale and the tubes still in his limbs. He gazed at me with reddened eyes and inquired in a frail tone, "Mother, is it fact that all my spouse performed was to damage me?" His inquiry was like a blow to my emotions. I approached, rested on the bed beside him, and embraced him. My drops fell, moistening his medical center garment. "Oh, Adam, my child," I stated in a stifled tone, "I do not know where all this began, but I vow I will not allow anyone damage you any more." Adam dropped his head. Drops moved down his thin cheeks. "Mother, I was mistaken," he murmured. "I did not shield you, and I allowed you to endure too much." I embraced him tighter, sensing that in the realm it was just the two of us attaching to each other in the midst of the tempest that had just passed. In the following days, the publication began reporting the update: Remedy Smuggling Group exposed at Area Medical Center. The titles yelled. They inscribed about a set of physicians and druggists involved in which Rebecca, Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson were main participants. They had been examining unlawful drugs on sufferers like Adam, using the kidney transfer as a cover to gather information for a global group. Reviewing those statements filled me with fright and ache. I considered Rebecca, of the occasions she provided me meal, of her kind statements that I now knew were untrue. I considered Adam, of the months he endured without aware that his own spouse was placing him at risk. Adam started his circulation and remedy care. His well-being improved gradually but steadily. One afternoon he grasped my palm, dropped his head, and stated in a stifled tone, "Mother, I was sightless. I trusted Rebecca and nearly allowed you to lose all." I caressed his head like I used to when he was young, and informed him, "Child, what is significant is that you are still here. That is all I require." But in my emotions, a mark had formed, not just from Rebecca's deception, but because I had allowed myself to be guided to the edge between existence and end without inquiring. I returned to my tiny residence where Joe was still in his wheelchair. I rested beside him and informed him all from Mario's capture to the view of Rebecca being restrained. I do not know if he comprehended all, but when I completed speaking, I observed him blink, and 2 drops moved down his thin cheeks. I grasped his palm, pressed it, and for the initial time in years, I sensed a tiny reply from him. A frail press, as if he were attempting to inform me he comprehended. I burst into drops, not from ache, but because I knew that despite all, I still possessed him. I still possessed my household. Mario became the tiny champion of the area. The day he came home, he hurried to me, embraced me around the neck, and murmured, "Grandmother, I regret I delayed so long to communicate, but at least I arrived in time to rescue you." I chuckled through my drops, embracing the lad, sensing the heat of his tiny frame. "You are the most courageous individual I know," I stated, tousling his hair. Mario grinned, the initial grin I had observed from him in days. I gazed into his eyes and observed that his purity was still there, although it was marked by what he had had to see. I vowed myself I would shield Mario, provide him a youth that no one could take from him. The final evening, I rested in my tiny chamber under the flickering illumination of the fuel light. I opened my age journal and inscribed the final rows. Blood does not always create you, household. At times, it is the fact that reveals you who truly merits to be named that. I lost much, but I located myself. I closed the journal, placed down the writing tool, and detected the precipitation striking the rear yard covering. I sensed an odd peace, as if the tempest had passed, leaving a clear sky. I gazed out the pane. I observed the faint lunar light illuminating the rear yard. And I knew that even if the path ahead was extended, I would never again allow myself to be sightless. I had recovered my own power, and that was the most precious item no one could remove from me. The account you have just detected has been altered in names and sites to shield the identity of the individuals involved. We are not relating this to condemn, but with the expectation that someone detects and pauses to ponder. How many parents are enduring in quiet inside their own residences? I truly ponder, if you were in my position, what would you perform? Would you select to be quiet to maintain the calm, or would you venture to face all to recover your tone? I wish to know your view, because every account is like a light that can illuminate the path for someone else. God always favors, and I am certain that bravery guides us to improved days. Meanwhile, on the ultimate display, I leave you with two of the channel's most favored accounts. I am certain they will astonish you,